Welcome everyone to the Monthly Game Challenge podcast pilot episode. We did not know what to call this stupid thing for way too long, so we eventually settled on something generic because we promise nothing, we deliver even less, and I feel like our name is already overachieving for us. So I hope everybody enjoys the first episode. I think they get better as we go along, so just hang in there.
Into the treasure vault, and there's a girl outside named Smoothie, and she's one of Big Mom's top 3 commanders, and her power is she can drain the juice from people. Like, she wrings them out like a wet rag, and she drinks it. And so Big Mom's now showed up, and so Brooke's basically trapped in a corner. He has to take on Big Mom, her army, and Smoothie. And so we think it's going to happen next week, or whenever, because Sean jumps on hiatus next week altogether. We think that Smoothie's going to try and fight him. Smoothie has a 900 million belly bounty, which is one of the highest we've seen in the series. So, and she's a commander to a Yonko, which Luffy could barely beat in Gear 4th. And so she's going to fight Brooke, and her Devil Fruit powers are going to work on him because there's no juice to drain because he's all bones. And then Big Mom will try and use her soul powers on him, but of course, he's already dead. So, there's a lot of stuff up in the air, and a lot of cliffhanger stuff, and so it's just so good.
You're saying she has the ability to juice people is now the feeling I know other people feel when I talk about JoJo's.
Yes.
Where I'm
it sounds stupid.
Oh, he's great. He creates zippers, and he unzips himself and then stops his heart, and people
I think when everything is Sticky Fingers is both aesthetically and power-wise my favorite stand. I just love everything about Sticky Fingers. If I could have a stand, it'd probably be Sticky Fingers, just for the cool factor of it.
He's almost like a one-hit kill stand.
Well, I'm a huge Akuma fan, so you just put a zipper in the ground, grab him, Shungoku Setsu, take him to hell kind of thing. But I always think when he makes himself explode on the train and all his parts fly out, and I'm that was just so neat. I like everything about Bucciolati, except his weird outfit.
I hated most of that series up until the train, and I liked the train, and then I hated it again. And then I liked it at...
Babyface was weird.
Is that the one where the machine makes a... That's like an episode of Rick and Morty. Morty, fucks a sex robot, and then has a baby.
I saw a lot of people saying, I can't believe Donald Trump is the person of the year. It should have been Rick Sanchez, and I'm these people are allowed to breed. They round up all the Rick and Morty fans and ship them somewhere else.
My one friend, she hated it because she can't stand gore. She doesn't like nihilism. She's very squeamish. And she saw an episode of Rick and Morty and she thought it was disgusting. The episode with Mr. Poopy Butthole that everybody loves, including myself. And she's no. I
already hate it.
She's it's awful. It's so gross and disgusting. And then I was talking to her recently. She said, you know what I've been watching with Spencer? Rick and Morty. And I was I fucking knew it. It's good. Nihilism in real life, is soul crushing. Yeah. Nihilism in comedy is funny because it's soul crushing.
Well, it's like Mecha Gamezilla said in the Casey Duck Butter Duck review. And he goes, the whole misanthrope thing, it gets old after a while. You gotta grow out of it. Now, I'm 28. And I'm still full bore. I hate everybody, and I'm okay with that. But eventually, I'm gonna have to grow out of it, and I'll think back to this time period, and I'll be like, "Oh God, that's who I was. How can you people stand me?" Stand up, Skype.
I hope so.
So, Super Mario RPG.
Yeah.
We'll have you go first because you have the more controversial opinion.
I guess so.
Do you remember it? It's been a few weeks.
I do. I don't like anything about this game except the sprites, and the sprites I don't even like that much because they're the Donkey Kong Mario sprites. Square has the best sprite work out of anybody ever. They do so much with so little. So there's little moments where Mario has to convey something, and he starts jumping around and acts like Bowser, and it's great. And then you have to listen to a story that's supposed to be lighthearted and fun, but it's actually just really boring. And then you have to play the game, which is supposed to be like kind of anti-RPG like and fun, and it's just really boring. That's like the big issue. The that little active battle thing where you have to press the button in order to get the hit is too easy to get. So you basically just have a 5% miss chance whenever you fuck it up because you don't care anymore. It's the same as Squall's Gunblade. It's like, if you ever miss Squall's Gunblade crit, you fucking aren't paying attention. There's no reason to not miss that. But when you do, you feel like shit because you just weren't paying attention. It's annoying. I'd rather mash my A button through a bunch of those fights than have to actually pay attention to the attacks. I like the way spells are handled. That was okay. Yeah. I don't like it. The boss fights. There was one really good one where that guy shoots the arrows. He can, like, disable a button. And that was fun. And then he becomes a normal enemy later. And it's not fun. Because you just wreck his asshole. And then he disables, like, your items. And then you keep wrecking his asshole. And then you go on. There's a lot of boss fights into boss fights. And they get harder and harder. So you have to grind a little bit as you go. I don't know. All of my complaints about the game aren't even in specific areas. They're just a general annoyance with how the game plays. So, do you remember playing it?
I got it as a kid because, as you know, my parents were kind of cool. They had an NES, a Super Nintendo. So, like, other kids grew up on, I don't know what other games there were, but...
Toe Jam and Earl.
Yeah, well, people grew up with Sega. I grew up with a Nintendo. And I grew up with Nintendo Power, and they would tell you what games were good, and so my parents would usually buy them. So when I was old enough to play games, the Super Nintendo was out, and I had games like Illusion of Gaia, Soul Blaze, all the Quintet games. I had games like I had both the common games and like the little more niche ones. And so I grew up on Final Fantasy 2 or 4, and like my dad the other day was like, remember Final Fantasy 3? And I'm like, you had a DS? Oh, right, I actually had to explain the whole 2 and 4 thing. It was quite weird. And so when Super Mario RPG came out, I'm like, I like Mario. I like RPGs. I'll give it a shot. And I liked it a great deal when I was a kid. I never beat it as a kid. I played it when I was like a teenager and beat it. Super Mario RPG I like. But I completely understand where you're coming from when you say it's a boring game, because recently, I mean, you played my cartridge and you see how far I got before. I didn't stop playing because I had to go to work. I stopped playing because I got bored. Now, there's lots of little touches in the game I like. I like when you see Luigi's star, when he's like, when I grew up, I want to be a plumber like my older brother Mario.
There's a lot of touching stuff in the game that I like.
But the gameplay itself, no, it doesn't hold me.
It makes me excited to play Paper Mario and Sticker Star.
Well, you want to play the N64 one, and then you want to play...
not
the 1,000-Year Door for the GameCube.
Sticker Star. Sticker Star is the bad one.
Yeah, I believe 1,000-Year Door is the last good Mario RPG.
All I know is there's 2 good ones, because Super Mario RPG isn't one of them. I feel like I might have appreciated this more if I played it when I was a kid, and I had already been playing RPGs. But it feels like a kind of like anti-RPG in the face of RPGs, and yet we have plenty of anti-RPGs today. So it's like, if you don't want to play a traditional JRPG, play Undertale, play Breath of Death, play whatever. So these like iconoclast RPG games that are being made just don't have an impact on me. It's in the same era as Chrono Trigger. It's in the same era as Final Fantasy VI. And yet, it's not even remotely close to being that good. I didn't do everything in the game. I didn't beat Culex. I didn't do side quests and max out every character. I just used Mario, Bowser, and Peach. Bowser is a tank. Mario's just a guy. And then Peach is a healer. And that's how every fight came down to. The bad guy attacks, does 2 hits, Peach heals. Mario attacks, Bowser attacks,
Peach heals, and that's the problem I would have is there would be a guy. One of the boss fights that was just annoying is he would insta kill your characters, and it's like, oh, I got to spend this turn healing him, or I got to spend this turn reviving somebody, and that it was very, very annoying and frustrating. Some of the spells, it's like they're useful, but they're not so useful. You're gonna use 20 flowers, and not heal like 6 times. So there's no point in using that. At some point, I realized that in the final boss fights, everybody had a minion. Kill the minion. When the minion's dead, kill the boss. If the minion respawns, kill the minion, kill the boss. And that was it. Just repeat like 3 times for the final boss fights. Yeah. There's not enough Mario to the game, and there's not enough Square to the game. Is my problem.
Do you think the game would benefit from being longer? Because when I played it recently, I realized I was blowing through without any effort.
The game needs filler. There's too much of... because I think about Final Fantasy, and like, say Final Fantasy 4, you get a serious like story point, there's a boss, fight the boss, and then you go fuck around in some caves for a little bit, and you do that entire whole dungeon, and then you fight a boss, and then you get a little bit of story. And I can't think of any part in Mario that was as long or interesting as like a dungeon in Final Fantasy 4. That's just and like I said, there's a few bosses where early on in the game you fight a boss, and then you have like 3 trash mobs between that boss and the next boss. And the next boss is considerably harder. So you have to either go grind or go do some bullshit, or you're going into it weakened.
See, I played Final Fantasy 4 and 6 as a kid, and I vaguely remember not struggling too much with them, because as a kid I would grind a lot, and I still like grinding today. But I remember Super Mario RPG struggling with it, because I remember levels made a big deal, and but it seemed like it shouldn't.
You only get a few points, but those few points make a big difference.
Yeah, I mean, when I played it recently, when you level up and you get the HP, the magic, the damage, I was never sure what to pick. I didn't know if I could screw myself over.
That's what I was afraid of. I was afraid of hitting a... Because it's not like SMT difficult, where I have to be like, well, if I put this into the wrong thing, fighting fucking King Frost later is going to ruin my day. But it never came down to that. I never knew what to make Geno. Like, I thought Geno has, like, some awesome magic stats, and he has awesome physical stats. So what do I do with him? I guess the answer is whatever the fuck you want. He's Geno. But I didn't like him, so... He's not a real person.
He's a real hero.
Send him back to where he belongs. Star Island.
The problem is, like... Super RPG, you could maybe make the argument that it's a good way to get like kids or people that don't play a lot of RPGs into RPGs, because the story is, while not super engaging, it's entertaining. The mechanics aren't too deep, but then again, when I was a kid, I was playing like Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, that kind of stuff, and I wasn't finding it too difficult, because I had a lot of time on my hands as a kid, and I had that kid spirit of, if I lost, it's my fault, I need to find a way over it. Whereas now as an adult, I think this game's stupid, I'm going to put in something else.
I feel like this game is the 1990s version of Fallout 3, Skyrim, Mass Effect, where it's a middle ground between something people already know and play and something that will get people into role-playing games. Where it's like, well, I don't like those gay RPGs, but I do like shooting people, so I'm going to play Mass Effect. And then you get into Mass Effect and you're like, oh, I want to stat up my stuff. And then after a while you're like, I like RPGs. And I guess that game's supposed to be like, oh, I like the Marios, and now I'm playing an RPG. And I don't have a love for Mario like other people do. I talk to people at work who play games on and off, and they're like, oh, I love Mario. He's the best. He's coming to iPhone. I'm like, I don't give a shit about Mario. I like Link. He's cool. I don't even like half of Samus's games, and she's cool. Mario is just a guy. Mario's Pac-Man to me.
I love Samus, and I have like one of her games.
Yeah, I feel like these icons of gaming, you see like Frogger and Pac-Man and the asteroid ship. He's an icon, right? They all are beloved figures, but only because people tell me they're beloved figures. I don't think anybody actually has played a bunch of these Mario games. I shouldn't say anybody. Obviously, there's people that have. But I don't feel like the general public has played every Mario game that's come out since Mario 1. I'm like, I'm a big Mario fan. I really loved Mario Galaxy 2. No, they're like...
Yeah, I've never seen a reaction to a Mario game. I'm sure you've seen it before, but the reaction when Twilight Princess was announced, it was like E3 whenever, and they're like, oh, before we go, and it shows like Link on Epona, and he's fighting some dude, and the crowd just goes nuts. Everybody's standing up, they're on their feet, they're just losing it. I've never seen anything even close to that for a Mario game being announced.
I agree. I think the thing is, you don't play Mario and get invested in Mario. There's no point where you're like, I'm at the castle, and I'm really worried about whether or not I'm going to save Peach. You know, Bowser's off the rails. Like, what a compelling villain. I think you just sit down and you're like, that was fun. I really enjoy playing, fucking throwing in my Super Nintendo every now and then and playing Super Mario or Super Mario World. There you go.
Yes.
And it's fun, but it's not like I put a Link to the Past and I'm like, all right, now I have like a bunch of items to go fight Aghanim, and he's an asshole. I don't think there's any investment in Mario. So whenever they say there's a new Mario game, people are like, oh sweet, that'll be fun. Like, did you lose your mind when you heard about Super Mario 3D World? No, you're like, oh, there's a cat suit. That's pretty neat.
Well, another thing about that is like mentioning Link or Samus is as you go through the game, you get like power-ups, and you feel like you're accomplishing stuff. And yeah, when you go through like Mario 64, you get stars and stuff. But I was always disappointed as a kid when I played Mario 64 because I thought the intangibility hat and the metal hat and all that and the wing cap were really cool, but they were such brief periods that now obviously you couldn't walk around with the metal and intangibility hat all the time because you were invulnerable. But I always thought it was weird that the wing cap wasn't like a permanent upgrade.
Yeah.
It's almost like those became almost more like puzzle games or puzzle platformers, whereas the older Mario games, I wouldn't say they didn't have any puzzle elements. I mean, especially the Lost World or Lost Woods or whatever they were called from Super Mario World. Sometimes when I still do a playthrough of Super Mario World, I don't know how to get to Chocolate Land. I'm like, is there something I'm missing? I keep looping around. But the level design itself is just left to right. Whereas when I went 3D, it's like, all right, what am I doing for this star? I gotta save the penguin.
I agree. It's like in 3, you can bank power-ups and hold power-ups for long periods of time because the power-ups let you cheat certain levels, if you want to call it that. But like you can fly over a bunch of levels if you hold on to that power-up. Whereas in like Super Mario 3D World or 3D Super Mario 64, I don't know. I'm a big Mario fan. All right. There's areas where it's like, well, if I just fly, I'm just gonna fly to the beginning of the pyramid and then that's it, or something like that. Like it's by making it more open in the level, you make it so that you have to remove options from the player. I don't know. Not a Mario fan. Don't like it.
Who would you recommend Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars to?
What?
Like if you had to have, what type of person should be playing this game?
Oh, that's the name of the game, Legend of the Seven Stars? I thought you meant there's a new one.
Did you think I was doing a thing?
I did play this game.
Did you think it was just called Super Mario RPG?
I honestly didn't give it that much thought.
I think it's on the title screen.
I don't know, to be honest.
Like a kid, like a 4 or 5 year old, do you think they could beat it?
I think like a 5-year-old, if they're, and I, like, Lord forgive me for I'm about to sin, a hardcore gamer child probably could beat this, and he would probably love it because I think it's right up his alley.
Or would you recommend it to like 20-year-olds that are like, I'm a huge nerd, and they
I don't-
walk into a game store and they see it there?
I see. I don't think anybody who is a Mario fan is going to want to play this because a Mario fan is going to want to play Mario, and a role-playing game fan, I don't know if they're going to like this because it's not very role-playing game-like, and I don't know if anybody who likes both is going to care that much. So I would be very interested for somebody to play this game that does not have any nostalgia for it and see if I'm just an asshole. Because I don't know. I don't see the cross-section that this hits well. I don't see anybody who's a big enough Mario fan in order to...
When you talk about like this era of RPGs, everyone always is like, what's the best RPG ever? Oh, it's Chrono Trigger. It's Final Fantasy VI. Like, there's a lot of SNES RPGs out there. People love Lufia 2, Rise of the Sinestros. I don't ever see people recommending or talking about Super Mario RPG for the Super Nintendo in high praise. It's certainly not up there with Chrono Trigger. It's usually got to get down pretty far on the list before someone's like, oh yeah, that game was okay.
I think there's a lot of people who remember it fond. Like, if you brought it up to me, like, that game was great. I love it. But if you were to ask them to list their favorite games, that game would probably be off the list. There's a lot of games this generation, well, last generation, that I feel that way about. Where I'm like, if you ask me, Residence of Fate, is it good? I'd be like, that game's fucking awesome. It's awesome. But if you ask me if my top 10 RPGs list, I wouldn't put it on there. I'd probably forget about it. Because even though it was great, it didn't leave that big of an impression. And if you take Mario out of this game, is there any reason to play this game? I mean, it's a Square game, so maybe that's it. But that I don't see anybody playing this if it was actually Doki Doki Panic, the RPG. Who would fucking play it? Nobody. Nobody likes the Doki Doki Panic characters enough to be like, oh, fucking... There's one guy out there who's like, almost. We were so close.
I'm kind of conflicted because I was thinking earlier, like, what if you took out the Mario characters, just the original ones? What if it was like Geno, Mallow, Smithy, like those guys? And I feel like Geno and Mallow and Smithy and them are cool because they're guests characters. I don't know if a Geno game or especially a Mallow game would be, even like in an RPG setting, would be like inherently interesting. I think Geno's cool because he's like, you don't expect him. Like, it's like, okay, you're playing a Mario game, Mallow's around, but he kind of fits the aesthetic because you think he's a toadstool at first before you find out he's a cloud kid. And you're like, I'm getting Bowser, and then Geno's like an action figure in game, and then he comes to life, and you're like, oh, that's really cool. That's a neat idea for a secret character.
Yeah. Well, I've talked a lot of shit on the game, but I do like how I do like Mallow's story. Story, in air quotes. It's alright. It feels like an actual RPG thing, where it's like, in FF7, you get Yuffie, you go to her, like, hometown, you learn about Yuffie and her stuff. But, I don't feel like you do enough for Genos. I don't feel like you do enough with Peach. Like, there's no mission where you go back to, like, Peach's castle, and she has to, like, argue in order to get out of the castle, and then you have to do a dungeon to fight. Like, go back to the Mushroom Kingdom, and, Toad is like, haha, no, you're not leaving. Like, you need to be here and be a princess. And then you guys have to fight Toad's dungeon. Stuff like that would have made it better than just you talk to Peach and then she floats down in an umbrella. And you're like, oh, she's part of the party. I thought that would have been nice because Peach doesn't have anything. Geno is neat because he's a toy come to life. And I think that's all right. But he doesn't have much of a side story, even though he has the biggest stakes in the story.
He was very appealing to me as a kid, and to this day I still think Genos is a really cool character.
I think his design is pretty neat.
I liked him because he's basically, if you play ActRaiser, whenever you go down onto the earth, you're a spirit, but you inhabit the body of a statue of a warrior, and that statue comes to life. And that was very appealing to me as a kid. I thought that was a neat concept. And then Genos is essentially the same thing, except instead of being a statue of a warrior, it is a toy, an action figure, basically.
Yeah, I like him. I think he's all right. I like the fact that Bowser's a good guy. What game is it? There's a game later on where Bowser's a good guy, and it's not one of the RPG games. And I thought that was really neat because I really didn't pay attention to Mario. And then whenever I played this game, he's not a villain. He's just a lonely asshole, which is great. He's like the insecure bully. There's the part where you go to his castle and he's like, all right, well, I didn't follow you the whole time. You're actually part of my crew, and you were just escorting me. And they're like, whatever, Bowser. And then he's like, I'm not going to help you guys anymore. I got my castle back. And then they're like, wait a second. If you don't help us beat Smithy, it's just going to happen again. He's like, son of a bitch. Let's do it. Let's get it over with. That's cool. I would have liked more Bowser. I don't know. I feel like the game would do for a reboot.
Now, I actually have a question related to that. Do you think this game benefits or suffers from a lack of cameos? And what I mean by that is, like, let's say for the Switch they announced a Super Mario RPG Legend of Seven Stars 2. And so it's going to be the same type of gameplay as this game, but on a new console and, of course, modernized. Do you think they would do like a Mario Kart 8 thing where it's like, you're going to have Link playable, you're going to have Samus playable, you're going to have Captain Falcon playable in your party, but it's an RPG?
There's a few cameos that I think are neat, but I don't see a reason to not have Donkey Kong. I don't see a reason to not... Like, I haven't played how far they've come since then. I don't know what Thousand Door and Sticker Star do. But I feel like this game needs to be branched out. It shouldn't just be Mario. They've already kind of made it clear that the entire Nintendo universe can be smashed together. They can be put in one pot, and then you love the characters enough that you don't care if Samus is supposed to be a dark, serious adventure game. She's goofy standing next to Mario, and you're okay with it.
So which Nintendo character would you put in a Super Mario RPG 2?
Well, I mean, I would think a remake of the original would do fine with all kinds of cameos thrown in. You can have the same story, you just lengthen out certain parts.
Samus is my obvious choice. Her magic spells would, of course, just be your upgrades to the game, like grappling hook, missile, super missile.
I feel like the obvious answer is Link, because he's the fantasy character. And then he can do spell casting, he can whatever, or Zelda, or whatever. Like, those guys are the obvious ones.
Fire Emblem characters are obvious.
The Fire Emblem are obvious. I feel like the ones that I would really like to see is Mario Kart. Like, take Toad in a Mario Kart, and then that's his thing. That would be funny. Something a little out of the box. I don't know, Master Hand. You could do neat things with stuff like that.
I wouldn't mind, like Fox from Star Fox would be weird.
I mean, they need to do more. They need to have summons. They need to have...
Yeah, I think one thing that Kingdom Hearts, at least the first one, the one I played, did well is how they incorporated a lot of characters that otherwise would feel out of place in as summons, like Bambi, stuff like that. And I think it'd be cool if maybe not having Fox McCloud playable, but being able to summon an R-Wing to do a strafing run would be neat.
Yeah.
Almost like a Knights of the Round type deal.
There's a lot of neat things you could do with this. It's hamstrung by just being Mario. The game is not awful. I just think it was boring. I never had this feeling of like, I can't wait to sit down and play more, which is a feeling I've had playing Gungrave. So I just want to contrast those two.
Oh man. I almost regret not making Gungrave your December game you have to
Gungrave. I mean, there was a point where I was like, I should put in Gungrave, and I never felt that with Mario. I always had Mario next to my computer so that I could... It's like, well, I want to watch this cooking video, so I guess I'll play Mario. But no, I think I would be interested if they RPG'd it up a little bit more, and if they expanded it. It would be much, much more interesting. From what I hear, the paper gimmick is used pretty well in those games.
I have not played Paper Mario for the N64 or the Thousand Year Door for the GameCube. I know those are very popular. I have no doubt that they have a decent quality. I don't think I'm going to play them and be like, this game's terrible. But I would like to, just because of all the buzz I've heard. I hear people praise those far more than Super Mario RPG.
Yeah, well, I mean, like you said, you never hear anybody say, oh, this game's great. But for maybe it's just because the N64 had no games. It was just like, hey, you should play Paper Mario because it's a great RPG. Because it's a system where there is no RPGs. But I don't know. I don't know. It's not good. It's mediocre. It's not enjoyable. I just kind of got through it somehow.
So it sounds like you went to work, basically.
I mean, basically, I in between playing this, I was literally trying to find anything else to play. I started playing Civilization again. I went back to playing some Overwatch. What was I playing on I was playing Gothic Armada. Like, I was just trying to find anything to do except play it because it just was boring.
You and I discussed how we both hate driving. And when we drive, we behave differently, but we still hate it. You zone out when you drive because
to a dangerous extent.
To a dangerous extent, because you don't like it. Whereas I'm hyper focused because every second is agony for me. And I think when it comes to a game we don't want to play, it's the same. You wanted to drag out playing Super Mario RPG because you dreaded it, whereas with my game Quest64, I just wanted to get through it as fast as possible.
So. Quest64. How does it feel to know exactly how I feel playing Morrowind?
Oh, I'll make you play Morrowind for one of these months. Just vanilla, beat the main quest. Quest64 is, it's Quest64 North America. In Europe, it's Holy Magic Century. And in Japan, it's the the L-Tale Chronicles, or My Little Magician Can't Be This
Basically,
Cute.
in other countries, it lies to you.
Yes. Quest64 is the first RPG for the N64, I believe. I really didn't do much research. And, okay, let me preface this by saying I played Quest64 as a kid. I enjoyed it a great deal, but could only get so far before I had to return to Blockbuster, the local Hollywood Video, or whatever. And so I liked it as a kid. To me, it was like, Super Mario 64 was interesting. I was very interested by Super Mario 64, but there's only so much you do in that game. Whereas Quest 64 showed me, like, oh, games could be anything. It was magical to me. No pun intended. And now that I'm older and I play it, I was very excited.
Don't say no pun intended like there's anything magical about this game.
Going into it, I was very excited to play it, and by the end, I just wanted it to be over. It was not enjoyable at all. So Quest 64 is an RPG game where you play as just one character. It's almost like an action-adventure game where you do nothing but just kill monsters. There's nothing in this game but killing monsters, which sounds like it's right up my alley. No puzzles, no platforming, none of that. But the combat is so...
Well, that's what a hunting game is. A hunting game is RPG-ish, kill monsters, the game. And this game is...
Yeah, but Monster Hunter also has stuff like crafting systems. It has other stuff to do. It has multiplayer.
It has combat for reals.
It has real combat. So the storyline for this RPG is you are a kid. You live in a monastery with your dad. I think you and him are the only ones that know like combat magic, because the Book of L-Tale gets stolen by a thief and your father chases after him. And it's been a few months, and the other people at the monastery are like, we really need that book back, and we need to know what happened to your dad. So you have to go find him. And luckily for Brian, the world is entirely linear. So basically you just go from town to town, and it's a very almost like BioWare-esque plot, where it's like you meet this one guy and he has the Earth Gem. And so you beat him and you have the Earth Gem now. And then you fight the Water Gem person. But the dungeons are all basically the same. There's no puzzles or anything. It's just what color the walls and floor are. There's a lot of stuff I want to talk about the dungeons and stuff later on. But basically, you get the 4 gems, and I don't actually know if they're important. I don't think you can use them, and I don't think you need them to get anywhere because they're directly in your path. The game's almost entirely linear. There are reasons to backtrack. There's secret... Oh, well, basically, how you level up in the game is you kill enemies like any other RPG. But you have your 4 elements: earth, wind, fire, and water. And you can find random spirits around that level up your spirit, like an element. You pick one element to level up. It almost has a Final Fantasy II-esque leveling system as far as all your other stats. If you take damage a lot, your defense and HP goes up. If you move around a lot, your speed goes up, kind of thing.
Has that ever been implemented well? I think
It's not this game.
I think people would argue Skyrim. But
Well, from what I remember of, I mean, Morrowind's one of my favorite games. I think it's might be the best one, but I still don't quite. After years of playing more, I still don't quite grasp the leveling aspect. Where everyone's like, you want to take the things you want as minor skills, and other stuff as major skills, and I still don't fully grasp that because I don't really think.
I always felt like the problem with this whole, you take damage to gain health or defense. It's like, well, if I level up my evasion, then I don't have any health, and if I don't have any health, I can't take any hits, so I can't survive hits in order to gain health. Like the system always works against itself.
Well, in this situation, the system doesn't matter because there's absolutely no punishment.
The best one.
Yeah, there's no punishment for death in Quest 64 except you get sent back to the last place you saved, and the entire game is just save spot, area to kill monsters, save spot, etc. When you die, there's no currency in the game, so you don't lose any money, and you don't lose any experience or anything. You just go back to where you last saved. So there's almost no reason to ever go back to a town. So basically, you go through the entire game, you get your 4 gems, you beat the end boss, and that's the end of the game. During my playthrough, I read up a little bit about the game because I was worried that there'd be one school of magic that was not as good as the others. And it's kind of weird because you have the fire, earth, water, wind elements, and the water one's the only one with healing. I don't know how you would beat the game without putting at least enough points to get the basic heal spell. You'd basically be grinding like intensely because your recovery items are important because they're rare. And so, I mean, I saved almost my recovery items just for boss fights. And so for like little fights, I would just, after every match or every fight in the game would basically be me going into a battle. I'd shoot spells at them until they're within melee range, and then because your melee is based off your magic, it almost always does more damage. It's just not an area of effect spell. So I read up a little bit, and I of course got healing, and then I put the rest of my points into like Earth. I think Earth is one of the best ones because there's an AoE spell in that where it causes a bunch of boulders so you can hit enemies multiple times. And that basically, once you get that, you kind of just steamroll through the rest of the game. But the game has no real difficulty except the penalty for dying is you have to play more of it because you have to backtrack. There's things, of course, I liked about Quest 64 and things I didn't. The biggest problem with the game is, almost in a Morrowind fashion, you can miss. When I was playing this, you watched me. That never goes away. Like, people play Morrowind, and they create their character, and they have low agility or low weapon skill, and they go in the wilderness, and a mud crab beats the shit out of them, because they click them a million times, and they hit, like, one time. But after, like, level 2 or 3, that's not a problem
The way I must play Morrowind is I either have to play a ranged character, so the missing doesn't infuriate me, or I have to get a lot of extra hit with my weapons. I can't play a melee character in that game and then be like, well, I'm going to go for the big one-hit high damage thing. I can't do it.
Quest 64 not only
has no gear, for starters.
Yeah, there's no items you get. The only items you get are consumables. You get things that let you move further in combat. You get recovery items, that kind of stuff. There's no equipment or anything like that. It's just all consumables. But yeah, the combat in the game, you have to aim your spells manually, which is really awkward because your character, it's not quite top down, but it's not like over the shoulder. The camera is your enemy in this game. A lot of times you'll just sit there going in a battle like, what is it looking And so you have to aim your spells, but even if they connect clearly, they still have a chance to miss. And it's not something that's like, a low chance to miss. I'd say it's maybe like 5%, which if you'd use like an AoE spell, I'd say maybe not 5%, like 15%. Like, you go through most of the game missing. And I don't know, I think there's a stat that affects it called agility, and you can use spells to increase your agility. But of course, you go into battle so often,
I think
and they're
running
so short.
increases your agility.
Yeah.
Which is dumb.
And so there are many times in the game where it's like you're low in health and you're fighting one enemy and he's up in your face, so you're not going to cast magic, you're just going to smack him with your staff. And so you go to attack him and it's a miss, and he attacks you and you take a huge amount of damage, and he hits you again and you miss again, and it's infuriating. There are a couple times, even by the end of the game, I'm like, I'm basically, the superpowered mage, and I'll use like my avalanche spell and all these boulders will come down. It's just like miss, and I'm like, I don't know what I could be doing differently. I will say that, as you know, I have a tendency to grind, but I missed an optional area. So even though I tended to not really grind, but I stayed a little bit longer in areas than I was supposed to, I was kind of at the appropriate level throughout the entire game because I missed this one optional area. I didn't know it existed until after I read through a walkthrough, and I'm like, I never went to that forest. Which is weird because there's only two parts of the game that are really skippable. One I really like, and it's one of the few things I do love about the game, and the other one is, of course, that forest where it's just you just miss out on it. The combat, the game's entirely combat, and the combat isn't fun. At least not for me. Trying out the different spells.
I don't think you have a controversial opinion there. Nobody seems to enjoy this game's combat.
I would not recommend this game to the vast majority of people. The N64 era graphics are charming. One thing I really like about this game is the character designs. Even though I don't like the game, I would never play through it again. It was infuriating to play. A lot of the character designs stuck with me, and I still think about them. You mentioned how this game feels unfinished, and after I did a little bit of research, the game is, of course, unfinished. Originally, we're going to be Brian the Mage, a girl who I think was supposed to be like a warrior type, and there is a pirate in the game. And their character models are still in the game, they're NPCs. And there's no quests or anything in this game. It's just get to the end of the game and beat the boss. So they don't serve any real purpose. You can talk to them. And it's a little interesting to talk to them and realize they're going to be a main character, a playable character. But right now they're just, like the warrior party member is just a princess in a castle, and she's like, go kill the bad guys. And the pirate, you can ride on his boat. As far as things I really liked about this game, they're few in number. There's an optional area. You get to this one area of the game, and you come out into a desert. And the desert's really big. You can see on your map. And so for the most part, you come out in this desert, and the area you're supposed to go to next is right near where you come out into the desert. But you see this huge, map to explore. And like 90% of the desert is nothing. It's just enemies, and you fight them, and it's boring. But if you go to one spot in the desert, it's like in the middle of it to like the southeast. There's like an altar. There's a floating tablet. And if you go up to it, it teleports you to like this parallel dimension with this big temple. Think of like the temple from Mario 64 in the sand level, where you have to like go down and fight the stone hands. But it's much bigger, and it's this really big level. And you go in there, and all it is spirits to collect and consumable items to unlock through like treasure chests. And you get to the very top, and there's a guy up there, and he's like, I was sealed in this parallel dimension. I can't leave until you beat the main bad guy, basically. And so you're like, neat. And you walk all the way out and leave. And it's really, I don't know. I enjoy it a lot because it's an optional area. And it feels kind of like, like in a Mega Man game or a Castlevania game where you find the secret area and you get a lot of free stuff. Like you pick a sub-weapon, that kind of stuff. And it's relatively near the end of the game. So that was neat, but I liked it because it felt magical. It felt mysterious. Like it wasn't just there to service the game like the rest of the game was. The game needed more stuff like that instead of you just arrive in a town and someone's like, the water spirit's acting crazy, and you have to go beat up the person till the water goes back to normal. As far as the bosses in the game, they're all right. I mean, the combat itself is pretty boring. What's really funny is you go to this one, the fire guy's the last one you fight, and I found him quite difficult. He's probably the most difficult enemy in the game for me. I didn't die, but I used a lot of consumables. And after that, the rest of the enemies are kind of pushovers, including the final boss of the game. I found him quite easy. I killed him in a few turns. So I don't know. This game, like you said, doesn't feel finished or play tested or anything like that. It just feels like they're working on a game. They scrapped like most of it and then threw out whatever this is.
I think, well, I played the game when I was very young, and the only thing I remember about it is it being barren, and the characters all looked very anime, but unique enough that you remember them, including Brian's ridiculous quail hair. And the one thing, I watched a Pro Jared video to kind of refresh my memory on what this game was. And Pro Jared mentions that the game boils down to water for healing, stone for damage, and fire for an anti-magic shield, because all the enemies attack in magic, which completely nullifies the entire game's combat. You just turn on the magic shield and you beat people up, which I don't want to say it's an oversight. It just sounds like
a bigger oversight
the
is
game
the
isn't
fact
done.
that buffs can miss.
That's crazy.
So, like, I was leveling up Earth.
Can you imagine Power Word shielding somebody and oh, whoops.
I was leveling up Earth and I got this, armor ability where it reduces damage you take. And so I was in a fight and the boss was hitting me quite hard. And so I used this armor ability and it said miss. And I'm like, what? And then, of course, it hits me. I guess I should explain how the combat works. When you go into combat, it's almost like a turn-based strategy game. Think of like Advance Wars, where you have how you can move each turn.
You have the Star Ocean like movement circle, or
yeah,
Tales of, I forget, one of those games.
It works similar to that, and so a lot of bosses, their circle of movement is far larger, so they'll just get up to your face and wreck you. That's the problem I had with the fire boss, the one who's in the level called Boil Hole, which is my favorite name for a level. The problem with the game is like there's a lot of promise. Near the end of the game, it gets really trippy, and I liked it a lot. I liked the level design, but again, it's just one long hallway. The camera system, I've seen a lot of people complain because you can get turned around. There's no maps when you're in a dungeon. The overworld has maps, but not in a dungeon. When you kill the enemies in a battle, Brian does a little jump in the air, cheer, and it positions him where you were originally. So as long as you kill the enemies, you can't get lost. There's a caveat to this. In the penultimate level, you go to the big castle before you enter like the dream world or whatever it is. And so you're just in this castle and you're killing these knights, and they do a lot of damage, but you can kill them pretty easily. And you fight a boss, maybe the third to last boss of the game. And he's in a symmetrical room. And so I beat him, and after Brian kills a boss, it doesn't spin you around, or perhaps I wasn't paying attention. That could be it. But I kill this boss, and I'm in a symmetrical room. And so I leave one door, and I'm like, okay, this doesn't look familiar. And I leave the other door, not knowing which one was the entrance, which one was the exit, and it's identical. And so I had to take a 50-50 chance on which way is the right way to go. Needless to say, I guessed wrong, and I spent about 20 minutes clawing down a hallway, and I came to the entrance of the castle, and I'm like, okay, so I had to backtrack, and that was quite infuriating. The level design itself is non-existent. You go in these dungeons, and it's just straight lines. Like, I don't want to make the Final Fantasy 13 joke, but it's literally just, you just walk down a hallway and fight monsters and keep going, then you're done.
I think the key thing between certain games and Final Fantasy 13 is Final Fantasy 13 is functionally a hallway, but there's games that are like Mass Effect gets this way, where it's literally a hallway.
If you've ever played Earth Defense Force 2017, those Earth Defense Force games, and you're in the cave, and everything in the cave looks exactly the same, that's Quest 64.
Yeah, but those levels are always descending. You're always going down, so it's hard to get turned around.
Well, this is completely horizontal.
What I'm saying is, don't drag EDF down.
Oh,
Those
no.
games are cheap, but at least they know.
See, the thing is, this game does a lot of small touches that are really cute. Like, one of the elemental boss battles you go to, and I really gotta stop calling it boss battles. It's just a singular enemy that has 2 attacks instead of 1. A ton of health.
Yeah.
And you come to this island, and it's the way it's done is really cool. You go up to the top of the island and fight. As far as me actually playing the game, I played about 90% of it. What I mean by that is I killed everything I saw. I never ran for a battle, and I was always pretty much level appropriate. Then after I beat the second to last boss, basically what happens, I'm going to spoil the story, is it turns out that...
Oh, spoiler warnings.
I really can't explain how or emphasize how little story this game has, which is fine for me. You eventually meet your dad, and he's like, I got my ass kicked, son. Avenge me. And you're like, well, I'm like, I can summon nukes from the sky, so yeah, I think I can handle that. And so basically you fight the king of this one castle, and you beat him, and he's like, there's actually a god or whatever. And he's like, you have to fight him in the dream world. And so you go into this dream world, and the dream world is not interesting. Like, I was almost hyped up for it, because they've done some really cool stuff in the game with their environments, and this was just a floating checkerboard in space, and you walk on it. And the enemies in this part of the game were far stronger than I was. Like, and I was overpowered almost in the previous section. And I was like, well, I've maxed out Earth. My water and wind are quite high. It's just my actual level, because it doesn't keep track of it, just how good your HP and defense is. I guess it could use some work. But I didn't bother. I just ran past every enemy for the rest of the game. And then I got to the boss, and I wrecked him, because I had this huge stockpile of recovery items. And the end of the game is just, there's no cutscene or anything. It's just you kill him, and there's like a big picture. I think I texted it to you when I beat it.
Yeah, you did.
And
So that was it? That was the end?
That's it.
Great.
There's no Brian and his father walking back to the monastery. I don't even know if there's credits. I honestly, at that point, I was so done with the game. Even in the last boss fight, I'm summoning meteors on him. I'm seeing like 3 out of 5 missing. And I'm like, he takes up the entire screen.
I would like to know the story behind it. I haven't researched anything, so I don't know the development troubles. I don't even know if they're well documented, because nobody cared about video games.
I read a little bit on sites like the Cutting Room Floor, which is great, and everybody should go to. Unseen64.net, another great website. And like I said, it was originally going to be a much bigger project. We had 3 party members. Brian was the mage. You had a pirate and a warrior girl. And I guess along the way they just lost the funding. And there's a very specific group of people that should play this game. And one is, you have to be able to tolerate shitty, infuriating games. But 2, there's a lot of stuff in this game that shows promise. That secret area in the desert I talked about earlier is neat. There's some character designs that are neat. If you ever want to see a game that you can tell was just, scrapped and salvaged and rushed together. Like, I'm not really into the whole, game development scene. I don't think game development isn't really interesting to me. But playing this and thinking about all the time and effort that went into it, and this is the result. There actually is another Quest game, though. There's the Quest game for the Game Boy Color. And I was going to buy that and play it, because that apparently has far more story than the actual N64 game. But I could not find it, and after playing Quest64, I hated it so much that I said no more. But apparently the Game Boy game is quite good. I can't personally recommend it because I haven't played it, but I would play that one.
I mean, these games, it's kind of like, I feel that this game was so monumentally important to the N64 that it is a shame Nintendo didn't do everything in their power to make sure it worked.
The game is ridiculously empty. And if you're the kind of person like me who, when you play Wet Dry World in Mario and you get like an uneasy feeling, or you like getting out of bounds of levels, like you and I have talked about before how we like not breaking games, but almost that early 3D era spookiness.
Mm.
This game has a lot of that, but it doesn't have enough of it to make it worthwhile. One thing that really got me is after you beat one of the first dungeons, you beat the first like true dungeon's like a forest, and you beat the boss there, and then you go to like a town, and you go into this actual cave, and it's quite a large area, and you just kind of like walk through it, and you see like areas to go, but there's no reason you would ever go there. There's no spirit there. There's no treasure. It's just these big areas. Like, this game is quite large, and the game doesn't use any of it. There's no reason you would go to these areas because like you see them, and they're just there. It's almost like spooky in a way, but you get to the end of the dungeon, the cave, and it's almost like reminds me like Ocarina of Time, like the tunnels, I guess, like in like the Lost Woods, like the log tunnels. But imagine that goes on for like 3 or 4 minutes. So you're just holding up and you're walking, and there's no enemy attacking you. The enemies don't attack you here, and you just keep walking and walking and walking, and it's just this one long tunnel, like almost like a Metal Gear Solid 3 ladder climb thing. And you turn around, and like I thought it was like the Mario 64, stairs, like they're eternal unless you do something.
Mm-hmm.
So I turned around, I still see the super long tunnel behind me. So I turned back around, making sure I don't turn around, and I kept going, and eventually you reach the end, and you're like, that was 3 minutes of my life where absolutely nothing happened. I held it up on the controller, and I'm not exaggerating. It's like I was browsing Twitter while holding up, hoping something would happen.
So things like that happen nowadays, where the very most recent thing I can think of is in FF15. You go to a dungeon and you descend a mine shaft, and the first time you descend, it's like 3 minutes. You're just going down, and then you hit the first basement floor, and each basement floor after that's 10 seconds, and you look up and you can see light, but yeah, you descended for 3 minutes, and that was Damascus load time. And your Quest 64 is so empty. I can't imagine they were loading anything.
Yeah, there's no monsters on the overworld.
There's
the only NPCs exist in towns.
There's no like no special music, like the ladder climbing.
The music. Yeah, there's only like one track in the game. That's it.
I mean, if you make it good.
I'm sure someone could be like, actually, here's the OST for Quest 64. I don't recall anything but the stupid walking. Like, you're in like a dungeon, and it's still playing the stupid like overworld music. And maybe I'm wrong. I was really just not paying attention when I played this game. It couldn't really. There was a few times when I was playing it, it sucked me in with something interesting, and then immediately you're back to killing monsters for hours just trying to get the next area.
I mean, if you can't tell a difference between in Zelda, you can tell immediately the difference between the fire, the wind, the water.
Yeah, I don't want to compare this game to Zelda 64 because it's unfair.
I feel like Zelda's the most clean level version of that, where it's like my head immediately goes to Vey, and maybe it's just because I played so much fucking Vey. I remember.
You mean Vi?
Shut up. I remember the different themes in like overworld battle, all very sharply, and even that game had terrible sound. That game's awful, but I remember it all very sharply because it was different.
Quest 64 can only, if someone wants to see a bad, infuriating game to play, you can almost get everything out of Quest 64 if you watch like a long play on YouTube. You don't have to actually play the game to get out of it. Look up the scenery, look up the character designs or whatever.
I mean, Pro Jared's 5-minute thing and your picture of the final. I feel like I've played it.
If you've played 3 minutes of Quest 64, you've played the entire thing because it doesn't throw anything new at you. Like, as a kid, I wanted to level up my spells all the way to maximum just because I wanted to see all the different spells you get. But Earth and Fire, for the most part, and Wind are all just different attack spells. I mean, sure, you get a few utility ones, and Water has more of that, but there's nothing really, like, clever that they do with magic. Like, once you get the Avalanche spell for Earth, you just put points in Earth because, you want to do more damage or whatever. I almost feel disappointed that I played Quest 64 because I have a much worse opinion on it after having actually played the game.
Well, for the longest time, you talked about wanting to play it again, and I was like, I didn't play it terribly long ago. It might have been about 10 years at this point. And I didn't get terribly far because even as a teenager with time to kill, I felt like I was wasting my time.
This isn't a game that you can even play in the background. Like, there's a lot of JRPGs, like, you know, you play Final Fantasy VI, you can kill dinosaurs for hours while doing anything else. This game, because you have to aim your spells, and enemies, you never really, like, eclipse them. Even at the end of the game, when I was a little bit over-leveled, I could still get overwhelmed and crushed. Like, if they kept throwing, like, waves of, like, 5 or 6 enemies at me, and I'm blowing all my mana, and I don't have enough to, like, heal, it's, you start to, like, paying attention. It's not a game you can play in the background. You have to focus on it, and there's not enough game to focus on it. Like, I'd play it, and I'd get tired, because nothing interesting's happening. But at the same time, I can't just mash my way through it.
Yeah. I knew it was awful. I remember it being awful. And you still had this nostalgia for it. And I was like, well, I mean, he wants to play it, but I also want him to remember how fucking awful it is.
It's weird, because you keep thinking the game's gonna open up. Every time you get to a new town, you're like, this is it. Like, you leave the first town, you beat the forest, and you're like, okay, I've made my mark in this world. I beat one of the 4 holders of the elemental gems.
You're waiting for that
gonna happen
again. You're waiting for that Zelda moment where it's like, oh, I collected all 3 of the gems. Oh wait, there's a bigger quest to do now.
Yeah, it's kind of weird, because there's a lot of stuff in here like I like, but at the same time, it's ridiculous. Like, you go into this inn, and you sleep, you save your game, and you go upstairs, and there's a girl sitting there. And you talk to her, she's like, I'm the spirit of the wind. She's like, I control all the wind on this planet. But my gem's been stolen, can you get it back? And the way they put it, it's like, why is the spirit of the wind chilling in the top room of this inn? But then they win you back, because after you take care of the wind and, like, the water, she takes you to this one, like, portal, and it sends you this one place, and you're like, okay, this is kind of weird, kind of, like, magical. And you meet this old lady, and she has, like, a weird cat or something. For every, like, 2 hours of boring gameplay, there's one good idea thrown in here, and it's just not worth it unless you have a lot of time to kill.
So I really like the Red Letter Media idea of a reboot, where you reboot something that was initially terrible, and you do it again so you can make it better. Do you think this game, if they took a bunch of the concept files and original GDD, and they were like, hey, this is what we were going to do, we couldn't, do it yourself, do it on PlayStation or PC, do you think that's a good idea? Or do you think they should just scrap it, forget it, it's gone in time?
The original Quest64, where you were 3 different people going through the world, I assume would play quite differently than the Quest64 we got, in the sense that you wouldn't be going around looking for spirits, because only Brian would use the spirits. And then again, if you have, like, a party and everything, one aspect of Quest64 I really like is how simple it is. And I think if they remade Quest64, they'd have to keep it simple. Only Brian, no other party members, no currency is nice. You don't have to worry about money. You just go into a town, they give you items. If you're out of recovery items, they'll give you some bread or whatever. They give you wings so you can go back to towns. I think the biggest problem with Quest64 is all your magic, for the most part, all your magic has to do with battling. There's nothing about, like, there's no levitation. Brian's basically, he's a magician who's basically taught just how to kill the fuck out of everything.
He's a person who plays D&D 4 or 5, where he's like, I'm the mage, and I'm going to put all my points into fireballs, because...
I don't like puzzles, as you know. I like 3D platformers, but basically, if I was going to play a Quest64 and make it good, I think a Banjo-Kazooie era Rare could have made this game really good. Put puzzles and platforming in there.
Have your magic. Treasure.
Yeah, or Treasure. A Platinum Quest64.
I mean, you sold me. As long as it's not Platinum Ninja Turtles.
I think if you just made it like a little boy trying to find his dad.
Like the little boys.
I think You could make it a good game by changing it just like a regular, third person RPG, kind of like modern Final Fantasy or whatever. But to make it a great game, you have to make it because you're a kid. The way kids see the world, kind of like in a Rugrats way, is they don't fully understand it, and so you could do some really interesting stuff by making the whole games from the perspective of an 8-year-old boy who has access to these, arcane powers. So everything should be a little bit otherworldly, almost like Psychonauts or something.
Earthbound.
I guess. Yeah, or like Earthbound. Make it weird. I mean, the world feels super small because it is. I mean, the game, like I said, is basically one big walk down a long hallway. But there are reasons, like how you said with Super Mario RPG, you didn't get the lucky shell. You didn't get the lucky armor. You didn't get Peach's frying pan, probably. You didn't get all like the secret stuff. And Quest64 is the same way. I missed an optional area. I didn't get all the spirits. I didn't even get all the secret spirits. Because I didn't need to, because all they do is increase your combat prowess, which I could handle the final boss easily. You could make it a good game, but that's a pretty big if.
Well, I mean, I guess the other question is, if you were to follow the general idea of the game, is there a point to remaking it? Is the game noteworthy enough that even if it was done well, it's still worth putting the effort into today?
The plot of the game is basically the book that created the world was stolen because only a guy and his kid and a bunch of peaceful monks was left to guard it. I really didn't pay attention to the story at all. I didn't talk to any NPCs because they all say the same thing. You go to a town and they're like, the wind gems be stolen. Okay, what do you say? You gotta get the wind gem back. Like, go to the next town. The water gem has been stolen. After a while, I just got tired. I think my favorite town of the whole game is the Dead Town. You go through this one area. It's past the boil hole. There's this big castle. Think of what was that, Minas Morgul in Lord of the Rings, like the big black and green castle.
Yeah,
it's like that. I mean, this came out, of course, before the movies, but it looks a lot like that. It's this big castle, and there's this dead town. Think of like Karazhan almost. It's a really cool area. All the townspeople are like huddled up in the inn. Most were killed. They're like, please save us, 8-year-old boy with magic, and you're like, I'll try. And that was really cool. But Quest64 at its core is a game about, it's almost like a 2D game in a 3D world. You just move left to right, killing everything in your path. And if you die, you just get sent back a bit.
Yeah,
if they announced a remake of Quest64, even if it was someone like, I don't know, even a good person that could do it nowadays, I wouldn't be excited.
Like, there's no... I mean, remakes today suck complete asshole because they either miss the point of the original or they are a direct remake of something that needs touched up. And neither of those sound appealing for... Do you really need to preserve the Quest name? The L-Tail name?
I think, like I said, the character designs look neat, but we've played other games that look at, what's her name? Remy from Ephemeral Fantasia?
Yeah.
She's got a cool design, but doesn't mean I want a remake of Ephemeral Fantasia.
A lot of the well, I mean, here's another question I want to ask. We play a lot of games that look like they're fake. They look like set dressing for NCIS. And they most of the time turn out to be either actually very good or competent. If we had not known about this game from being kids and it had no hype and we just stumbled upon it on the shelf, is this one of the games that we sit on the side and we're like, that game's fun? Or is it the game that we beat or we play for 5 minutes and we're like, that's fucking ungodly dreadful?
Quest64 we would probably stick with for a bit because you keep thinking it's going to open up. But if you pay attention, there's signs in the beginning that reveal that the game is going to completely fail on almost all your expectations. The game just starts. You press start, and you're in a dialogue with somebody. It's almost almost like a Dragon Warrior, where the king's like, "Let me tell you this tale." Like you're just talking to this monkey. He's like, "You got to find the book and find your dad. See you later." And you're like, "Oh."
As a kid,
okay.
I mean, he wasn't an idiot kid, but was still a naive, silly kid, I played better RPGs, and I was excited for this. I don't remember why. I would assume it's Nintendo power. And I remember starting the game up, and you just are in that fucking castle, and you're like, oh, the game's on. Like, I don't know what I'm doing.
I don't like, opening cutscenes, especially if they're unskippable, like Ocarina of Time. But this game just starts.
You need a lead-in of some sort.
There's the main menu screen, and then it's just, okay, here's a dialogue box. All right, see you later. I think my first indicator that this game was going to be not good was how the inventory works. The inventory, you should press, I think, L shoulder button or R shoulder. I always press the right shoulder button. The inventory UI is essentially non-existent. It's a box that's like in the middle of the screen. It's a horizontal line. You just go left or right. And that's it. The order is the order you obtained them. So the better stuff is always to the far right. So you got to just move all the way to the right till you get to the good stuff. And it's like, it's the most bare bones like inventory thing you can make in a game. I wouldn't say it's lazy. It's just, there's no way they intended this to be the final design, and they just said, we don't have time to fix it. Just, it works, throw it out.
Yeah, you want to say it's lazy, but that's most likely not the case.
There's a lot of work in this game that, like, I'll stop and say, like, that's really cool. And then it's followed by 2 hours of me just killing the same monsters over and over again in a dungeon, thinking, when is something interesting going to happen?
I feel like this game compares to Fable in a lot of ways, where Fable was hyped up mainly because, well, I shouldn't say mainly, but mostly because of it being the first RPG on the Xbox that anybody cared about.
This game has almost no downtime, because when you get to a town, there's nothing to do. You don't really need to find out what to do next, because there's only one place for you to go. There's always just one area left.
There's new items for you to buy.
I can't stress enough how this feels like a 2D. I don't want to say like a Castlevania game, because that'd be like an insult to Castlevania.
Castlevania has branching paths.
Yeah, it just feels like a 2D game on a 3D plane. It's like there's always one place you're gonna go. There's no deviating from the path. And there's, unlike other games where it's like, well, this path has an item down. It's like, yeah, but it's either gonna be a spirit, which they're a dime a dozen, or it's a recovery item, which, big whoop.
Something this game does, unintentionally, but it does that I like, and I wish was in more games, is the no currency, where it's infuriating when you play a game and, like, the king is like, all right, you gotta save the world, or everybody knows you're the chosen one, or whatever, and then you go to a shop and you're like, all right, I have a bronze sword. These monsters are gonna kick my ass unless you give me something decent. And they're like, well, that's gonna be $800. Well, I can't afford that. Well, I guess you're not saving the world. We're all gonna die. It's like, why? I understand if you're going to another country in a JRPG and they don't want to give you free stuff, but I shouldn't even say JRPG, it's in Westerns too, where it's like, if you're the chosen one, if you work for the government, why can't you just get it? There's a thing in Berserk where they're like, no, you just show that to people and they're going to be like, yeah, you can have this for free because you're royalty, pretty much.
Are we allowed to talk about Berserk? Yeah, Quest, I really don't know what else I can say about it except that it's an unfinished, unenjoyable game. And I really hate to shit on it because you can tell a lot of work and love went into this game. But at the same time, why would they release this game with the misfunctioning? Why? Did they think it was entertaining or fun? There's no strategy involved. You just use whatever spell deals the most damage, and a lot of times just bopping them on the nose with your stick. Which we'll miss.
I always find it interesting to see the game development cycle of certain things, because sometimes they run into a programming snag and something like there's that infamous story about Iwata reprogramming Mother 1 or 2 because they had a very crucial programming problem. It's like that game wasn't going to be delayed because people were lazy. They just hit a snag. And then there's overambitious people like Molyneux who they're like, we're going to do all of this. And he's not talented enough or doesn't have the time or the money, and all of it gets cut and it's a mess because you didn't have the foresight to say, let's dial it back. And then you have Obsidian, who's a little bit of both, or Platinum lately, who's a little bit of both. And I would love to know how much of this game was the developers were either not talented, not capable, how much of it was the scope was beyond their capability and they pushed it to the limit. I would like to know that, but I, at this point, don't think we ever will.
I don't know, and I don't want to say I don't care, but because I saw like clips from magazines where there's going to be other characters and other stuff to do, and of course
I just
that
feel
got
like it's
cut.
such an important milestone in like history.
Well, when I was a kid, I liked RPGs a lot, and the N64, blew me away. And like I said, I was very excited for this game because it's like Super Mario 64 with stuff to do, and then you play it and you're like, oh, there's nothing to do in this game.
Yeah. I mean, that's how it feels for like Dragon Age 2. You get to a point and you're like, I'm just doing the same thing over again. They're telling me I'm doing it for a different reason, and I'm doing the same thing. There's not enough to do.
Yeah, the few charming aspects in this game do not. I mean, this took me quite a while to beat, and I bulldozed through it. I don't remember exactly. It keeps track of your play time, but I don't remember exactly paying attention to it. But it had to be at least over 10 hours, and
I just like looked up how long to beat, and it was like 10 hours.
yeah, and that's. Again, I skipped the entire end of the game because after a while I'm like, I'm there. I want this to be over because it's not enjoyable. Going into battle, using the same spell. I mean, you can scan enemies, I guess they have like elemental weaknesses, but it doesn't matter because I don't want to use like a Pokemon analogy, but there's a lot of times when just using your strongest move will do more damage than the type weakness. Like, unless I'm up against guys that are rock elemental, or earth, I guess I should say, or using earth powers, because that's what I buffed up was the best. So even if I saw a guy that was like weak to fire, my fire was at 1. So I'm not going to use fire spells against him. I'm just going to crush him with rocks. And I did.
We're going to sound like Nintendo fanboys. We've talked about Nintendo an awful lot.
And, well, you're stuck with an N64 game next month.
Yeah.
And I at least get to branch out a little bit with a PS2 game.
I have another RPG, which, funnily enough, we found out about. What's the name of it? Hybrid something?
Hybrid Heaven.
Hybrid Heaven? I thought that was the word, but I didn't want to say it because it sounds retarded.
When I was a kid, of course, I had Nintendo Power, and I saw Hybrid Heaven. I was very interested in it, but I never got a chance to play
And
it.
you're like, Quest failed, so this is the new RPG.
This is the new RPG. Am I going to play the Aiden Chronicles? Please no.
But I was like, well, N64 didn't have any games. It has a staggering small amount of games, and there's great ones by Nintendo. But the game doesn't have any RPGs, and we looked up a list of RPGs, and this was one of them. And I was like, fuck.
Hybrid Heaven is... I've played 20 minutes of it, and I got stuck. And I said, I could look up how to get past this, or I can force you to find out how to get past this.
I did use a guide for Super Mario RPG. Not really for much. Because
if you didn't get the legendary stuff, it's not like you really broke the game.
The game's fairly simple. I think the only thing I used a guide for is I think there was a puzzle that I looked up. I think there was a boss that just gave me a little bit of difficulty, and I was like, is there something I'm missing to beat him? And it was just I hadn't leveled up at all, so I had to go grind a bit. But basically, I used a guide for that, and it didn't actually help me.
I used a guide for Quest64 just to see what I missed before the point of no return, and I saw the forest, and I'm like, that makes a lot of sense.
I'm probably going to use a guide for Hybrid Heaven because
I would recommend using a guide because
you said the word puzzle, and I was like, oh boy.
Hybrid Heaven is some kind of weird combination of Metal Gear Solid, and I don't want to say Tekken or wrestling because that will get you excited. But people online.
But you just did.
Apparently, when you get into like actual combat with people, it turns into some kind of weird like strategy fighting game. It's called Hybrid Heaven, I think, because of the storyline, but I think it's also a hybrid of gameplay.
Oh, like they're clever.
Yes. I'm not going to say much about it just because I want to see what your take on it is, and I want you to beat it so I don't have to.
I'm almost done with FF15. So I'm going to get around to it soon. It doesn't seem like it's long, thankfully. But yeah, I'm actually excited for it because I like these RPGs. I wish I had more time to play even the bad ones. Sadly, even the bad ones tend to take like 20 hours, which is a good chunk when you work 2 jobs. You have Maximo, which is quite long for compared to what we've been doing. But
Maximo's longer than Quest64.
It should be.
Oh, jeez.
It
I was
should
gonna
be.
try and bust it out on the weekend. I don't know if I can
No, it's like 5 levels. I mean, it's not hugely long, but it's like it's not easy.
I've played like an hour of Maximo so far, and I can already tell you there's things I like about it and things I don't like about it. It reminds me a lot of Spyro the Dragon, like the way it's set up with like different hub worlds and stuff like that. And
it's a PS2 game in the It's a Super Nintendo game in the PS2 era.
Yeah.
It's. I don't want to. We shouldn't talk too much about it until next recording. But the thing that I remembered about it that I loved was that Super Ghosts and Super Ghouls and Ghosts, whatever the fuck the second one is, was it is the best way to make a sequel or remake in 3D.
My biggest problem with Maximo so far, which I don't mind talking about now because I know it won't be a problem soon, is I have stuff and I don't know what they are. It's like
they don't explain anything to you.
I'm playing through it and it's like, okay, you got some blue fairies. I'm like, all right, and some ghosts try to steal them, and I'm like, you can have them. I'm not using them. There's a blue bar under my health. I took a while to figure out that was my shield's health bar, and it's just nothing is explained. There's no dialogue in the game.
I will save you a little bit of heartache, and I don't remember some of the power ups. Like there's special boxers you get that don't do stuff, or do stuff, and I don't remember what it is. But the one that I remember that you could probably save your money on, which I know as soon as you see it, you're like, I wonder what that power up is because they show you early on. It's Stinky Foot Cheese.
Oh yeah, I saw that right in the beginning.
The foot cheese stops you from getting grabbed on the soft ground where the hands come up. It's basically worthless.
I never get hit by those.
You don't really need it.
Rapidly jump.
It's a pain in the ass when you're trying to fight an enemy on that ground, but you usually don't need to. So don't spend your money on that. It's not worth it.
I think one thing that threw me off was about Maximo in the beginning, and I really stopped talking about it, but the combat is much faster than I expected. I'm used to like when I saw the first enemies, I'm like, oh, it's gonna be like Dark Souls with like the lumbering attacks. That guy came right up and smacked me right in the face, and I'm like, oh, okay, it's one of those games. What's going on in One Piece right now is basically all the Straw Hats are captured.
Go ahead. No. I knew this was coming.
So what's happening now is all the Straw Hats are basically captured by Big Mom.